Assembling the scarf on the feathered paddles is a little bit tricky. Since the angles are weird, things don't line up in a logical, obvious way. So the best thing you can do is do some dry fits, play with it a little bit, and what it's going to come down to is just eyeballing it, trying to see that the paddle is straight. A couple things I try and do, I try and line up the tips of the cut here with the end of the scarf cut here, approximately the tip of this broken off a little bit, but that'll give you a rough guide, and then trying to sort of split the difference on any error on one side versus the other. What makes these particularly tricky is the shafts aren't square, so their dimensions through the spine are different than their dimension across the shaft. So things don't line up in the way you might imagine. So the first thing I do is just scuff up this scarf cut with a little bit of sandpaper just to open the pores a little bit, make it so the glue is going to adhere better. And then just sort of put it together. And you'll find that there's sort of a wider side and a narrower side. If you put the clamp on the narrower side, it tends to want to squirt out. So if you stick it on the wider side, and this is due to the fact that it's at a non-90 degree angle. And again, we're going to try and line up these points here a little bit. Just trying to look at the amount of wood showing on the scarf here versus the amount of wood on the scarf here. Try and make that fairly even. And I'm going to just look down the shaft. Try and see if it's straight. And if it needs a little adjusting. So again, I'm doing this dry right now, just to get a feel for it. You know, once the glue gets on it, it's going to be a whole lot slipperier and harder to have everything stay in place. So just getting a feel for what you're going to have to accomplish once the glue's on there makes life better. You can then take a pencil and make a few marks here just to help you get a sense of where it's going to have to go when you put it back together. Then we'll use a waterproof wood glue. Get it on here. Spread it around a bit. And see, it's much slipperier now. And it wants to slide lengthwise. Once you get it lined up, put it aside and come back and check it in a few minutes, make sure it's still straight. now that the glue's dry, I want to blend in the scarf joint here. So basically I'm just going to aim down towards the flats here. So take this point down to the flat here, take this point down to the flat there, and likewise all the way around, and then start blending in the radius. So I have a radius here, I'll start blending that in, and radius here, start blending that in, and just merge it all together. Once I've got the scarf rounded out, or at least roughly rounded out, I want to start refining the overall shape of the shaft. And I'd like it egg-shaped. So I'd like, when you grip the paddle, the knuckles would be a little bit narrower on that side than it is on the palm side. It's already a little bit oblong in that it's thicker this way than it is this way. So it's wider or taller than it is thick. So it's got an oval shape which will help index the hand, so more obvious where the blade orientation is going to be. But also it's just a little bit more comfortable if it's a little bit egg shaped and a little bit narrower. So this part of the hand is in the narrower spot and this is a little bit beefier spot. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm just going to go ahead and sort of concentrate on that side of the paddle with the plane. So I'm tapering it in slightly towards the back face of the paddle, this being the back face, front face. So I'm tapering it slightly towards the back face. Then once that's tapered in there, now I can start working on getting rid of any sharp edges. So again, I used a 1-inch diameter round over bit, 1/2-inch radius to start this round over, but I've got 1.25 by 1.125 here. So it left some flat spots, top, bottom, left, right. I want to get rid of those flat spots, so I'm just going to start blending that edge in a little bit. And I find a variety of tools actually work pretty well for this. Right now I've got a Nicholson rasp. The block plane works. One of these Shinto wood rasps works pretty nice. And I have these Japanese float style planes, which all depending on which wood you're working on, some will work better than others. So I like to have them all out, and sometimes I'll just change because I'm bored. I want to get rid of the flat spot on the top edge here and the bottom edge, and this will all blend in with a nice smooth curve. Sitka spruce is a tough wood, and as a result, it does get a little bit of tear out. Gotta pay attention to the grain. The final arbiter of whether you've shaped it well is if it feels good to the hand. That's the only thing that's really going to matter in the long run, is if it feels good to your hand, because your hand's going to be touching this all the time you're using it, and if it feels good, it is good. I found one of the better ways of getting a really round shaft or smoothly rounded shaft is the shoe shine method. I'm going to start with some 50 grit here and work up to higher grits, and you'll see how it goes. So I ended up putting 2 coats of epoxy on all the blades and the paddle shafts just to make sure I had a good level surface there, get that sanded smooth, and it'll look really nice. And the epoxy is like the best primer you can put on the shaft as far as something that clear coats will bond to really well, and bonds to the wood really well. So at this point, I'm going to sand everything smooth, get it ready for the clear coat. I could use a varnish on it, but I'm planning on using the same 2-part rattle can stuff that I used on the Micro Bootlegger Sport. I think it'll be a good tough finish for the paddles, last a long time. And it gives me a chance to actually use something that I've used that product on and see for myself really how well it lasts. I've only used that for customer products before. So that's my plan, and a good 220 sanded finish should be a good place to start applying that clear coat. So I will start at a 120 to level the surface and work on leveling the power face of the blade first. That will be the easiest to just get leveled down. I'll do some power sanding on the back, but with all the contours, the power sander is not quite as effective. Where I need to get into the details a little bit more, I'll crank down the speed on the power sander so I don't end up burning through this epoxy finish. And then from there, I'll go on to hand sanding, and I'll do the 120 and then go to 220. You'll see I've got some little clamps here on my sawhorses that just sort of tame the paddle so I don't have to hold on to it while I'm sanding.